All right, so the conversation is more, first I want to cover some of the basics. I think your personal experience also for this specific crowd is relevant as an international professional that found his way in this land. So we have something in common there. But then even most importantly, what is the best way, in fact, to pitch and to grab attention for local, very relevant VC funds here in the Valley. So this is a general conversation that I would like to have.
Yeah,
Uh,
sure.
and before we start, I think that give a little bit more of your background. Again, you have an interesting mix of both locations, but also what brought you here at the end of the day.
So I was saying I was made in Greece, ended up here about 10 years ago as a means to escape Greece with a lot of education. I remember when I was a Stanford student, I applied to intern at Bain. And the partner there was like, oh, you are 25, you have collected all these degrees, you don't have much work experience, what's wrong with you? It's like, some people collect paintings, other collect cars. I got into the degree collection business because where I grew up, this is what people do. Like, you don't have like a job waiting for you. But ended up here in 2009. It was an amazing time to come to the Valley. It was when the iPhone was 1 year, 1.5 years old, was when the App Store was like 6 months old. Everybody and their mother were building a social network. And I had to do a social network alongside some of my Stanford course mates. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. We lacked the original thinking of what the product should do, but we chose a really bad platform also to be building on top of. We decided to launch something on LinkedIn. We thought because we're one of the very first teams to use the LinkedIn API, maybe it would work out and the distribution gods would be kind with us. Unfortunately, it didn't work out. So I learned firsthand what it means to take platform risk. But during that process, I met a lot of venture capitalists. And sometimes when you walk around the Stanford campus, there are more VCs than students. So this is what essentially happened to me. We were in the very first batch of what is now called StartX. Back then was called SSE Labs. And one of them gave me a chance, took a leap of faith, and Chris Farmer, yeah. So Chris Farmer was at the time considering joining John Catalyst and launching the nationwide seed program for us. Now he is the founder and managing partner at Signalfire, which is a really interesting local VC firm here. So he gave me the opportunity to join the industry. I wasn't really thinking much about joining the industry, but ended up taking the leap of faith, mostly because I really liked some of the profiles of my partners at ZC. I found everybody to be a really interesting character with diversity of thought. So joined the team right when we're getting started in California. So the firm is almost 20 years old, the first 10 years only in Boston and New York. So joined when we're getting started in California. And it's been a wild and very fulfilling ride ever since. Timing is everything in business. So I got lucky to join at the time when the mobile app ecosystem was becoming huge. And it was the time when essentially Apple and Google Play democratized consumer web investing. Till then, as you know, Marco, the VC game was, oh, I'm very successful, have a lot of connections, have backed founders, they introduced me to their friends. But then Apple came out with the App Store concept, and you could actually literally see all the products that consumers really enjoyed using and paying money for. So I was a young person just cold emailing every cool app that was doing really well in the rankings and stumble upon some good ones that we invest or tried to invest or, made a lot of money or lost our money. So this was a pretty good experience.
Yeah, and I want to talk and demystify maybe some of the life of a VC, or maybe mystify if it makes sense. But before going there, you tap upon your life at Stanford once you were there, and just stumbling upon some of interesting products and solutions. I heard the story of how you eventually called the founder, what became the founder of Snapchat at the time. So maybe you can remind a little bit of that story there also, because typically we see the other side, right, of startups craving for more capital. I mean, the real good deals are the opposite. Are you literally looking for the right signals that you can find early on. So why don't you share real quick that story, because I think it exemplify also the role of Stanford, this concentration of opportunities.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, when I showed up at Stanford, I thought it was a Four Seasons resort that happened to offer academic courses on the side. It's like this ridiculous campus that's so nice. So it was a different time in 2011, 2010, or 2012. Like back then, companies would go out to raise a $500,000 seed round. 6 months later, they would have raised $390,000, and they would be, oh well, I think that's good enough, sufficient, so for us to hit the milestones, and we could go and raise the Series A afterwards. Now that times are crazy, it's a good time to be a founder who's raising capital, because in SF alone, there are 300 micro VC firms from like four, as you may remember, 9 years ago. So the Snap story is as follows. I was 1 year into the VC game, and there was an associate at our firm, General Catalyst, and I was spending pretty much 1/3 of my time at Stanford, because at Stanford, every student wants to be a founder. Turns out, kind of bad investment, time-wise ROI. Like I met almost everybody who said I'm a student founder, and I tried to convince my partners we should be giving capital to everybody. Also, bad idea. I'm grateful that they said a lot of no's. It was an emotional roller coaster. But during that process, yeah, that's also StartX, but outside, yeah. Like StartX only captures like less than 10% of all the teams that get to start companies. A lot of projects like Snap get started as part of a class project. So during that time, I was meeting a lot of student entrepreneurs, and a bunch of them kept talking about that gentleman, Evan Spiegel. And some of them said, the most unbelievable product designer I've come across. Some others said, this is the stupidest product I've come across. All the guys, whenever they heard about it, they thought about sexting. So clearly he was a polarizing figure, and I ended up cold emailing him. Because whenever you hear about controversial ideas or controversial people, it's potentially very compelling. At a minimum, it drives word of mouth momentum. And when you have word of mouth momentum, you basically get free users, free customers. The press is excited to write about you. So I cold emailed Evan. Ended up meeting him a couple of weeks later. Big mistake. This cost us probably a few $100 million, maybe more. This 2 weeks, because during the time he signed up with another VC firm. I had to go to Boston, where the firm back then was headquartered, for LP meeting, annual LP meeting, like the people who provide us with the capital. But ended up meeting him at the Stanford GSB. We took a coffee meeting there. And it was really compelling. Like he was one of those founders who had extreme clarity of thought. So he said, I want a product that is going to make everybody feel happy. I want to emulate real human communication. Yeah, he was a senior at Stanford, yeah. He could have graduated. He dropped out with 3 courses left, but he could have graduated. He just did it because he wanted to drop out. It was like spring quarter of his senior year. So he had extreme clarity of thought. Like the number one motivation for him was to build a product that was the fastest camera app out there. Of course, he couldn't describe the selfie revolution that would happen thanks to Snap. He couldn't articulate that, oh, it's a great time to be building this company, because for the first time with iPhone 4S, the front-facing camera is high quality. And it's also internet connected. So he couldn't articulate that stuff. And then he gave me access to the metrics. And it was really interesting, because 20% of the users were using the product over 50 times a day. And I had never seen something like that. Also, 80% of the users were women. So all the guys who heard about it and they were like, oh, forget about it. This is all about sexting. Clearly, since the users were mostly women, there are not that many, women into sexting, especially among themselves. So the numbers told a really interesting story. It was very small scale. It was like fewer than 100,000 downloads in the history of the company till then. Growing. Seed stage, yeah. So we met him then. Too bad he was signing with another really good firm, Lightspeed. So we kept in touch. We tried a couple of times over the summer to invest in the business. Went and visited him at his dad's home in LA that he had turned into the first HQ. His dad was at home, and Evan was like, "Oh, Dad, let me introduce you to some friends of mine from Silicon Valley." Like he was dressed in his pajamas or something. So we had a lot of good stories from that time, but it didn't work out, unfortunately. And then we ended up doing part of the A in the fall of 2012, and part of the B less than 9 months afterwards. So it ended up being a pretty damn good outcome for us. It could have been legendary though if either I had met him like earlier on at this when the seed round was happening, or we had managed to do $2-3 million round in 1921 pre, which back then sounded crazy, and he turned us down. But now this valuation sound like regular seed round.
Right, so I think that's a good example of how things unfold there. And you mentioned really the timing is at the essence. There is no, time really to beat around the bush. Really need to once you have that feeling, especially at your stage, and you mentioned that you're mostly focused on early stage in your role. But let's try to expand on that and just tell us the life of Niko Bonatsos. How do you spend your time in a typical day or week? What does it take to be you today?
Yeah, so from the outside, sounds like really amazing. Like, oh, the guy's meeting with cool companies every day, can do whatever he wants. But in essence, and I'm not looking for sympathy, it's very much of a grind because when you have a portfolio of companies, there's always some shit going on. Somebody's running out of cash, or is gonna lose their CTO or a big customer, or somebody's sleeping with somebody else. And we as venture capitalists have to be genuine listeners, good thought partners, problem solvers with our founders. So there's probably 1/3 of my time goes to working with our portfolio. Then 1/3 of my time is going towards trying to find, evaluate, and win new investment opportunities for us. Like every year, I get to invest in a couple of Series A, Series Bs, and I don't know, 3-4 seed investments on behalf of the firm. And then the final third is working with my partners to help them out on their evaluation of companies or firm-related stuff, or broader ecosystem building, coming here, trying to network with good people and tell the story about ZC. So if you look into my calendar, it's probably 8 to 10 meetings every day or phone calls. I get to meet with 15 to 20 new companies every week. So it's a good number. That's how I get to learn, especially at the early stage. Get to know what smart people are really passionate about building. And we don't care how they look like, where they went to school. We don't check passports. Honestly, we wouldn't care less about that stuff. All we care is about insane level of ambition and the ability to learn really quickly so that they can level up like a video game character and become a legendary CEO in their space. And then a lot of email. I spend 2, 3, 4 hours every day doing email, which is a lot of work. Yeah.
So did it change from the time that you described before? Your meeting with Snapchat. It was kind of the same sense of hunting in areas where you need to be early. To be creative also in finding the right mix. Is that changed in the last few years? You've been almost 9 years in a growing role. Is your habit changed? Emails is stuff that probably people in younger generation that use much less. So you need to be up to the time as well to try to be creative in stalking people and finding the right solution. So did that change?
Yeah, so we're very hungry and we're eager to meet with more companies every week. That's how I learn, especially for the new, what's coming up. I get to hear the story from insanely ambitious and very passionate individuals who are building the future. I now have to help a lot of my partners evaluate and win investment opportunities, especially with some of our younger team members. I have to say no to their investment opportunities that they're very excited about, as my now partners, said to me back in the day. Back then, I was mostly investing in just seed and consumer, and then mostly consumer. Now I invest in consumer, marketplaces, SMB, enterprise apps, a little bit of frontier tech. So clearly confused now. Um, Now I do Series A, seed, early B. Some of our companies are raising growth rounds, so working with them. So that's the breadth is, much larger right now, and also the firm has evolved quite a bit. Back then, we're just early stage investors. Now we're true multi-stage investors. We can write checks that range from $500,000 to $150 million dollars in one check. We invest a lot more in Europe and in India. We're not doing that stuff when I joined. So, like in the last 3 years alone, my amazing partner Adam Valkin, we invested, through him in Monzo, Deliveroo, Shift Insurance, Brainly. Partner Joel invested in Lemonade in Israel. So this is all new stuff that we're doing. So working with them and the rest of our team to find opportunities all over the world now.
Got it. And we're going to talk about the present and the future, but let me spend a few more minutes on the past, because I think is especially in an audience that is at this level, and we have the opportunity of asking more personal questions. Can you share a little bit of more of your upbringing? How were you as a kid? Where you said that you weren't looking to become investors. I'm not sure about entrepreneurs as well, but how were you in Greece in elementary school as a kid?
Yeah, so that's a great opportunity for venture capitalists to rewrite history, of course. So thank you for the opportunity. But I grew up between Greece and the UK as a kid. I was born in a medical and academic family. We didn't have any entrepreneurs, especially of scalable businesses in our family. So the options for me were, oh, try to be a good student and hopefully you'll find a job and you'll be a, like upper middle class kind of person in Greece. But always my parents were trying to get me to travel with them in Europe and travel with them in the US. Turned out that I was better at math rather than biology and chemistry. So going and becoming an engineer came more naturally to me out of pure laziness. Like seeing my dad reading all these, huge books and trying to memorize stuff. And then my brother who ended up becoming an MD, like having his library full of books. I was like, oh my God, how do you do that stuff? But when I went to study electrical and computer engineering in Greece, like back then I never met anybody who was eager to start a tech startup or was considering joining one. And this is not like 20 centuries ago. This was like in 2002, I ended up becoming a freshman in college, but was always curious to find internships. So ended up joining a biomedical devices startup in Boston in 2006. That was that was an early stage company that had just been acquired, and this opened up my eyes. And so for the first time, I got exposed to a tech startup. I was really excited about the commercialization of technology. So networked my way into doing research at the Harvard Medical School, but realized during that process that doing a PhD was very painful for me personality-wise. Like the professor was coming in and he was like, "You guys have it really easy now." Back when I was a professor, I was when I was a PhD student, I was sleeping at the lab, and also I needed to play the IT person, and I was like, "Whoa, I don't know if there's something to look up to, or I'm sorry, for the month's misery." So I ended up running as far away from that as I could. So I ended up in Tokyo, which was a great time. So being in Tokyo as a 23-year-old was a phenomenal time because the Japanese actually had built the smartphones that we now have had in our pockets for 10 years before everybody else. Like I remember in 2007, 2008, when I was in Tokyo, we had like the equivalent of Google Maps, the equivalent of email, the equivalent of live, like photo-based translation. Like you could buy stuff, with your phone. Like everything was there. The gaming networks were there that over time evolved to become the social networks in Japan. So it was really fortunate to work for what now people would call computer vision. Image processing was called back then, much more humble domain. But the Greek in me came back and said, "Oh, I'm too young to start working full time. I'm lazy. Let's go back to school." So I ended up in Cambridge in the UK in 2008, 2009. And for the first time, I got exposed to VCs and ARM, which is now a company that all their chips we have in our smartphones, legendary company, yeah. They got started there, met some of the early founders. I met Automatica, which was supposed to be a legendary company. Some of the older people here may remember them. That HP bought them for like, I don't know, 10 billion bucks or something, and ended up becoming a fraud. But realized while I was at Cambridge that, at least back then, the most ambitious founders sooner or later came here, either to raise money or to find customers or to sell their business or find mentors and executives. So it's like either now or never. Got the Fulbright scholarship and ended up coming here. So basically, it was just a curious mind, and I was doing this trial and error thing over many years, and ended up at the right place at the right time. Cambridge was okay back then as a startup ecosystem. Like back then, you needed to come here to become successful. Now, Silicon Valley is a mindset. You don't need to come here. You may come here like to build a network, have a presence, but you don't need to be actually, over here to be really successful. You can do it from anywhere. You can raise some money here potentially, but you can be a very successful entrepreneur from so many different places right now.
So you mentioned a Fulbright. Here are 8 Fulbright students. If you can raise your hand, those are there. So they would like to talk to you. And also they're fresh from the boat, arrived this week. So here for 6 months. Did you get any mentors? I mean, official mentors. That's one of the things. When I came to America, a few years after, when I started at Google, that's when I saw that everybody really wanted to have a mentor, which then I figure is actually extremely opportunistic, but very efficient. Is a good way then really to try to grab what it takes to a specific career path or whatnot. Did you find that as well? Did you look for a mentor at the time?
Yeah, so actually, I was really fortunate that my family, despite having humble academic and medical roots, they also put me in touch with some really interesting people from other disciplines. So as I was growing up, and as I was an undergrad or like graduate student, I was always on the lookout for other people that were like 10, 20 years ahead of me and eager to learn from them. So obviously now, the past decade, the most terrific mentors I've had are some of my partners at ZC. But even when I joined the industry, I found some mentors outside of our firm who've been very kind and over time introduced me to investment opportunities of theirs. They gave me a lot of feedback. So that's something that, especially when you're an outsider to this ecosystem, it's one of these huge opportunities that you should be pursuing. Like mastering the art of cold email is critical to your future success, especially as an outsider. So I remember coming here at Stanford, I was cold emailing Elon Musk, like a lot of legendary people. And when you're cold emailing people, the worst thing that can happen to you is you get ignored. So like I see literally no downside. But if you get lucky, somebody really cool may give you some time, and then it's up to you to. It worked, yes. So we cold emailed him as part of a student project at Stanford. We were 1 hour late to that meeting. It's very embarrassing. And turned out the reason why we're late to that meeting is because we're a team of 4, and we want to do a strategy class project on Tesla, where we want to have a meeting with him, the head of HR and the head of engineering, to hear them out, because we're convinced, and this was 2009 fall, that they would miserably fail. So I emailed Elon Musk and was like, hey, do you have some time to chat about why we think you're going to fail? And the guy replied, said, yeah, I can meet you at the end of the day on Tuesday. We're so late because one of my student partners at the time couldn't figure out how to turn on a Prius. So foreigners, right? We didn't have Priuses in the in Europe at the time, at least not as common, and didn't ask for help, so we're stuck. Uber was not there back then. So 2009, by the way, getting a taxi from Palo Alto to San Francisco, $120. Now it's 55, so it's an immediate. So like thanks to VC dollars and now public investor dollars, so that's pretty good. But yeah, we went there, and he listened to us. Like he really listened to us. He gave us time despite us being embarrassingly late, and he said, you guys may think I'm going to fail, but Mercedes had just given him a lot of money, and Panasonic had given him hundreds of millions of dollars. And the only condition was that he would continue to run the company for a long time. But our point was, hey, there hasn't been a car company that is historically amazing at owning all different customer segments: sports cars, luxury cars, family cars, and like really cheap cars. So that's what we said to him. You can't do it all. So maybe, so far we've been okay, but we didn't anticipate that the company would be so successful. And then he gave us some really good advice. Like he said, what doesn't matter what you do, like you're going to be working really hard 24/7. What you control in the beginning is your how big the prize is going to be if you get on the other side. So try to go after something that is a really large market opportunity. So if you, in the unlikely event that you're successful, you're going to get handsomely paid for.
And this is a fantastic story that I think you hit one of the most, one of the busiest entrepreneur in the world, running 2, 3, or 4 companies. I lost count. I don't know, 2009, definitely I had at least three companies, and still, answering your mail and probably meeting the following week as students, probably because you hit it in the failure possibility. It would have been a success, probably hear more of that. That's, I think, very telling. Um, on that page, I find you to be one of the nicest guys in the industry here in that world. Very accessible. Clearly, this shows. In your LinkedIn profile, you put your email address and say, "I'm always happy to review your best ideas." So don't be shy. So you make it very simple to approach you. Do you see the world of Silicon Valley VCs kind of changing overall from the 8, 9 years that you've been in that world? So what are your feelings about that?
Yeah, so absolutely. And thank you for the kind words. It has changed quite a bit. So it's a lot more competitive than what it was before. There are probably 15 multi-stage firms like ourselves. Back then, there were maybe a couple. There are, as I mentioned before, hundreds of seed funds only in SF alone. So this was not the case back then. There were a couple of super angels, and maybe, Jeff Clavier had started what is now Encore. Mike Maples had started what is now Flatgate. So that's a major difference. So the VC industry has grown quite a bit. A lot of capital has been trying to find its way into high-tech startups that are promising growth and good returns. So fund sizes have gone bigger. Number of funds has increased quite a bit. The headcount in VC firms has increased quite a bit. Back then, there was the philosophy that, for VC, you got to be much older, you got to have a lot of experience. It's almost like the last job before retirement, like where you play a lot of golf, you take a few meetings a day, everybody's begging you for your money. Now it's the other way around because there's so many firms and so many VCs. You're kind of begging the entrepreneurs to take your money because they have a lot of options. I know this sounds kind of crazy to some of you who are not based out of Silicon Valley or the US, like in other ecosystems that are capital starved. It's a whole different story still. So yeah, it's a ton more people, a lot more capital, much more competitive than what it was back then. And round sizes, of course, as a result, have gone bigger. Valuations have been higher. But bear in mind, now we're like almost 10 to 11 years into a bull cycle. So the longest of all time. And this is a place that thrives through a series of booms and busts. So we'll see how the future unfolds. And there is the market cycle, there is the tech cycle, and then there is how the company that you guys are running will perform. And the more of these you get right, the bigger the outcome is going to be. Of course, the vast majority of startups, unfortunately, don't work out. But some of them that work out well, basically, like produce pretty much all the profits. Like it's every year, like 10 to 15 companies produce 80 to 90% of the profits for that specific vintage. And all of us, especially multi-stage funds, are hunting for these opportunities. Back then also the market was only here and maybe a little bit in China. Now you can make actually really good money in Europe. There's a lot of promise that you can make a bunch of money in India. And China is like as big and as successful as we are here.
So we normally talk about what it takes to be a rock star entrepreneur. What does it take to be a rock star VC?
Yeah.
I'm mentioning rockstar because we're finishing this week, by the way, with a party that I host that where the team is rockstar. But just as a connection.
It's really easy. You just grow your hair and then it happens, right? It's really easy. Now we're in that phase where we need to empathize with Gen Z as they're starting to launch companies and pitch founders. But it's two things. One is returns. Like, do you have unbelievable returns as an individual and most importantly as your firm? And number two, one that is the leading indicator for like having over time amazing returns is whether a founder who is considering raising venture capital puts you in the top 5 names whenever they start that Google spreadsheet or Google Doc of, hey, who are the 5 people who want to pitch for our next round? So if you are in this like first 5 slots, it's a very enviable, desirable spot. Because, first 5 people hear the pitch. If none of them says yes, then it's the following 5 people and goes, like that. So if you manage to do this for founders of all different sectors, stages, different parts of the world, it means that you're doing something right.
Got it. So really is paying forward. Those are cycles that take longer typically. So it is, especially if you start early stage. So you need to build on that. We're going to open to a question from the floor in a second. There are a few other questions that are kind of random in the ecosystem macro trends. So one is very simple: is what is your view today of the startup accelerator programs? YC keeps being successful, but also to some extent, some of the VCs don't quite see as the right partner, or to some extent with a number of issues in partnering with YC downstream. A few other major accelerators kind of are morphing into something different. What is your view? Is this still a place for the traditional startup accelerator?
Yeah, so I do think there is absolutely a place for startup accelerators. I'll just talk about like 2 needs that accelerators can fulfill. The first one is for those who are outsiders to the major ecosystems, so people who don't have a network, nobody really knows them, whatever they've done before doesn't translate into something relevant. So if you join the right accelerator in a major tech hub, this could actually, make life easier. And people will take you seriously. People will be eager to take meetings with you. So that's one big need that accelerators serve. The second one is when you join an accelerator, of course, you receive some capital. And for some people, this is the first capital that they can raise, and this is very important because there's only one reason why companies fail: they run out of cash. There's no other reason, at least to the best of my knowledge. So you receive some money from an accelerator, but also you can start building the business by virtue of selling to other companies in your accelerator. So especially at YC, if you're a company that is in the dev tools business or the SMB business, like you can come out on demo day and be like, I have 80 customers and I'm growing 20% week over week, and my round is 50% done, and you have 2 days to decide if you want to be taking the other 50%. That's pretty powerful. So depending on the accelerator that you're attending, you could very quickly make progress on your business. In regards to YC, it's much bigger now than what it was before. It's a factory. Is it a formidable force? Absolutely. Are there others who are doing a good job? Yes, like in other local ecosystems, like like Entrepreneurs First, I think, is doing a good job in some of their markets. Certain groups of from the Techstars ecosystem are doing a really good job. So there are a number of other, smaller, more boutique players as well, like Michael Deering here at Harrison Battle. He has a kind of like boutique accelerator that he's running. South Park Commons, Ruti, she's doing a phenomenal job there. So they're like this kind of like curators, high quality community builders who are doing a good job. So we're paying attention, yeah, to a lot of accelerators, both here and overseas. And also for us, it's like a great ROI on our time when we walk into a demo day and we can see, it's like department store for VCs, right? Like you can do some window shopping or you can decide to spend some real money if it's like YC demo day.
So you don't see that you're being ripped off by higher valuation there. You see that as a value of filtering. I'm talking about YC in particular because it's the biggest by far, and so you think it's a good value for what you're getting there. Cool.
I mean, also we've invested in Stripe, in Gusto, in Atrium. These are like core YC companies, so no complaints, Like if we just continue to do a good job with Picking, great.
All right, let me start opening with a few questions here in the room because I want to make it a little bit more interactive. You want to start, Bart?
Okay, works. Just landed in San Francisco 1 hour ago, and I saw the soft comment by Larry Ellison about WeWork, talking about valuations. And I would like to get your take on this WeWork IPO postponement, valuation, and how such a thing might impact the whole circus, meaning from the capital fundraising up to the exits, whatever.
Yeah. So WeWork is a really interesting case study of a phenomenal entrepreneur fundraiser, building a very capital intensive business during the good times, but also getting started at the time when he could scoop up a lot of cheap real estate because it goes at the heels of the financial crisis in New York. Like fortunately or unfortunately, we're not investors. Some people clearly, including the founders, have already made a good chunk of cash. It's tricky to get very excited about the company right now. And again, it's safe position, to say what I'm saying. It's tricky to get excited because for a company that has raised over $10 billion, not to see any operating leverage from the tech and whatever they've been building over the years. Like, what's the point of, raising expensive capital from VCs? Like, what is the tech piece? Like, I don't understand that stuff. For sure, the sentiment has changed for all these companies that are burning money like there's no tomorrow. And even the ones that have incredible fundraisers running them in a world where Uber, Lyft, WeWork, are not getting high marks from the public markets, it is a little bit of a moment of reckoning, and we see that as well because there are a number of private companies that are like 1, 2, 3 years behind some of the ones that I mentioned, and they're consuming a lot of capital and they're eager to raise capital, and times seem to have changed over the last 6 months. So, of course, this could go back to what has been normal for the last few years, where Wall Street was rewarding companies that had high growth rate, but not a lot of discipline on the unit level economics. Or the pendulum can continue to shift towards, hey, do you have great unit level economics? Do you have phenomenal operating leverage in the business? Great, we're going to be excited. And you see that like with companies like Zoom. These are the ones that are really getting rewarded right now. I mean, all the other stuff that we are all reading about, like some of the good or the spicy stuff that the CEO and his executive team did, it's unfortunate, or I'm sure people should have known. But when founders have so much control and they are successful raising money, they get a lot of passes, of course, which is fortunate and unfortunate.
Let me just expand on that. Well, if you guys want to raise your hand so we can give the mic around. One of the data that we're going to share with Mandy Bridge next Wednesday is really about the change of flow of capital that is landing in Silicon Valley. And one thing that is pretty clear is for the first time ever, there is more capital that is being deployed here that originated outside of Silicon Valley, in particular with corporate venture capital. So SoftBank, their Vision Fund, has built an industry by itself, and those might be some of the shortcomings of that model that still has to be proved. Do you have any specific thoughts about, the role of a Vision Fund in general and some of the mega rounds that are really building industry sometimes from nothing?
Yeah, so I would say it's great that you have a firm that is really eager to invest in super capital intensive projects. At the same time, though, you need to have founders who will know how to use this capital wisely. Just because somebody gave you $500 million for 20-30% of your company doesn't mean that your company is worth many billions of dollars. Also, it doesn't mean that you've really made it. Like, you still need to have amazing unit level economics, happy customers. And sometimes when you raise this capital, then you feel like you got to start doing a natural acts. Your board is putting pressure on you because they're like, oh, we gave you this money, you were growing, now you're not growing as fast. What the heck is going on? So you start taking shortcuts. So it's on the founder and their board to really use this capital wisely. Otherwise, over time, if their economics are not converging, it can be really painful, really painful.
Can you pass the mic there, Fede? Maybe you can help passing the mic. Oh, so there's a question there.
So we saw a lot of money go into clean tech in 2008 through 11, and it didn't work out too well for most investors. Are we seeing more go back in now, or is there still that fear from 10 years ago?
Yeah, so we had our fair share of losses in clean tech, but thankfully not as much. We only lost a little bit over 100 million bucks. So I think for anything that's capital efficient and you're not running at the risk of the Chinese government really subsidizing the hell out of it and you have no business, yes, there are opportunities. So if you stay closer to the IT side versus running what is project finance business, there is interest. I'm not saying that clean tech is a hot space, but firms like ours do take meetings, do make investments in capital efficient businesses in the space that we treat as other IT focused companies.
There's a lot of countries now, especially in Europe and Asia, that are experimenting the creation of governmental funds that basically co-invest with the local VCs. Do you have any opinion on that? I mean, the presence of the public sphere in the whole VC game?
I think it's great news because in particular for capital starved ecosystems, for the local founders to have a pool of capital that they can have access to get started, that's great news. Like in my home country in Greece, there's 250 million euros that has to be invested over the next 3 years, thanks to 80% of it being from the European Investment Fund. There's no market for this capital, but it's great news because anybody who is okay in putting together a pitch deck can get started. Now, some of this capital comes with certain strings attached. So like that you need to have a strong presence there, employ a bunch of people. So the fewer of these requirements you have, the better it is for you and your business. Also, try to raise capital on market terms. Like a lot of the managers there, they're very like hawkish as VC, like they want to get as much of your company as possible, and this could result in a crowded cap table in the future. So if you just raise, as much as you need on market terms, no string attached, great, you you can get started. Of course, the managers in these funds, it's not that they've been doing this for a long time. They have a network and they can truly help you. So like that's on you to do the networking, figure out who else you should be signing up as a mentor and all this good stuff. But it's very positive. And hopefully some of these funds over time will be able to survive on their own, raise capital from traditional LPs and have good returns. And that's how new whole ecosystems could become sustainable. So I take it as a very positive.
So I work with European startups, and one of the common themes I've heard from them is that they find it hard to get capital unless they have a presence in the US. Do you think things have changed, and what are your thoughts or advice to a startup founder who is looking for capital here but not based here?
Yeah, so things have changed toward the better for a few reasons. Number one, there is a collective hallucination among VCs, especially in San Francisco, to invest as much money as possible in remote teams or companies that are doing something in the remote work space. So if you just brand yourself as a distributed team or somebody in the remote work, like that's great news, you know? And every year, you know, there's a whole new set of hot sectors that are popping up. So if you manage to brand yourself a little bit and position yourself really well, that's great news. So that's number one. Number two, as we talked about before, there is a ton more capital locally for European startups now that wasn't there before. So companies don't come here without having raised anything. They don't come here without making like no progress. So like the companies that come here, they already have raised like some seed money or maybe more. They already have some progress. So that's great news. Number three, Europe has a good rep. Like after like many decades of nobody making money in Europe, now actually after the success of like Spotify, IDN, like and go down the list, you know, like the 25, 30 unicorns that are out there, Europe is a good place where you can make real money as a venture capitalist. So we are paying a ton more attention compared to before. Not saying, you know, that has turned into Silicon Valley overnight, but you can actually make good money as a VC now in Europe. And then for, do you need to be here to raise money? No, but if you have good metrics and you're a good storyteller or combination of the two, life is easier. If you have some good mentors here or people like Marco, who is very well connected, this could offer you an unfair advantage or make you be perceived as a safe bet. If you're a good self-promoter and produce content online and make a case that you're one of the most compelling founders in your category, that's also a plus. I, on behalf of GC, have made 3 seed investments the last 9 months in Europe-based companies that, as of now, they don't have any plans, you know, to come to the US. But all of them are very ambitious founders who are selling to a global market, and hopefully we'll build something meaningful over time. A few years ago, I wouldn't have considered doing something like that.
Yeah, that's definitely a trend that has changed. Any more questions here? Otherwise, we'll okay, go ahead.
Hi, my name is Thomas. We are a Europe-based startup, and I have a question. If you are investing in new startups, I would not ask what is the red flag for you, but opposite way around. What are you looking at? So which attribute is the most important for you? It's a team, it's a product, it's a market size, what is it? So what are you looking at? Thank you.
Yeah, so if I were to answer this question in one sentence, it's like investing in a market that's opening up in front of us right now. And this is a team that we think the founders level up as video game characters to own that space over time. Because if the market in front of you is opening up like crazy, your product may be shit, the team may be inexperienced or first timers, but the customers are dying, They want more of it. Investors are seeing that. They're really eager to throw you money. And if you're a learning animal and ambitious, you will learn how to swim in the deep sea waters. So some people manage to do that. Others, it takes them longer, or they don't survive and a competitor comes in and eats up their lunch. Consistently, when we do our portfolio reviews, we see companies that are in great markets. They get acquisition offers. They get a lot of markups. We also see amazing founders in like shitty markets continue to hire good people, but also not making a lot of progress. So a combination of a founder who can learn quickly in a market that's opening up in front of them right now, like it's basically inflection point for the market, inflection point for the company. That's what we're looking for. Otherwise, we can always wait and pay up for the next round.
Very quick on that one. Red flags. When you see in the slides that somebody will present you a potential exit strategy, is that a yes, yes, or a no, no?
I don't like that as much, because especially if I see very modest assumptions around exit strategy, I'm like, are they really ambitious? Do they want to go for it? Because the truth of the matter is, whenever somebody raises venture capital, their business model changes to that of the venture capital industry, which is in desperate need of massive outcomes. So I don't like that. When I see customers who are not, when I see founders who don't know their customer well, or they don't know the numbers well, I also get very nervous. When I see founders where they come in, it's like 2 or 3 of them, only one does the talking, where you ask the question and there are 3 different answers from 3 different people instead of finishing each other's sentences. One of my portfolio companies today, I introduced them to, and it's a really good company, I think. I introduced them to 5 of my partners because there's gonna be another round in a few months. And oh my God, it was really embarrassing. They bombed the presentation really badly. They forgot about it. They put together a terrible deck today. It was obvious that they hadn't done any prep work. My bad for being lazy over the weekend instead of reviewing their deck. They had made a rookie mistake on the financials where they showed, because we haven't yet approved the operating model for 2020, and they showed 4x return year over year in revenue, with operating expenses for the business only growing 20%. So unless you're like Juul during the good times or selling Coke, I mean, this doesn't happen as often. And one of my smarter partners, picked it up. And the founder there was like, oh yeah, that's wrong. And he started editing the financials in front of us. And that's a company that will go out to raise like $30-40 million. And it was a really embarrassing moment for me as the lead investor in that company and for the founder. So this was a red flag.
Well, you already made an investment, so you better back them up. We're not going to mention who the company is. What is the most creative way that a founder pitched you? That you say really grab your attention? If there is one. I know you really value crazy ambitions in general, but and also being very sturdy and rely on cold calling and. But is there any experience of a very creative way that some funders actually grab your attention?
I mean, a lot is happening now. Like people are sending me stuff at our office, or they stop me on the street, or a lot of cold emails on social media or my John Catalyst email. I don't think it's about drawing my attention. That's not that hard. What's more important is like captivating me and making me feel greedy or suffering from FOMO during a meeting and be like, oh my God, this is a company we have to invest in. This is a founder we absolutely are dying to be in business in. And for me, it is a combination of, is this a founder who can tell us how the world's going to look like in 5 years in very extreme detail, and we buy in that version of the future? And secondly, is there any evidence, that whatever they have seems to be doing okay? Could be a shady product, as I mentioned before, but if they do more of that, things are going to be looking really well. So I don't know. Somebody today sent me a bunch of product for me and my wife. Don't recommend that. People send me a lot of ridiculous emails like, "We're going to be the first 2 trillion market cap company." Immediately delete those. Others are really eager, to chat with me at an event. Yeah, there are many ways, to grab the attention of venture capitalists. That's not that hard. Like, we're getting paid to listen to pitches, right? Like, at the end of the day, we're really getting paid to do that. What is hard is to really get in our minds, so that on Saturday, instead of spending time with my wife, I can't stop thinking, of a company that I met during the week.
All right. Any more questions here in the audience? Let me ask you probably the last question here before we break. You have one more? All right. Go with the question and then we close it.
Quick thoughts on impact trends where there's this impact investment movement, especially in early stage companies.
So the question was about impact investing. So yeah, people like us do care about the social mission of a company. So most of our capital comes from nonprofits, mostly university endowments. So we want to do really well by virtue of also doing the right thing and doing good for the world. So we care about it. Like, one of the best businesses I've seen in my venture capital career was Juul, and we took a position not to invest in them, and looked like idiots like a long time because we didn't want young kids to get addicted to the product. So like we care about it, and there are a lot of other super high quality investors who deeply care about the social mission of the product and the business. There's also a whole class of social impact investors that you can go after. And some of them are also not as financially motivated. We are really greedy, fortunately or unfortunately. Some of them are not. So it depends on what your business does. The good news is you have options, especially in this part of the world.
All right, let's finish with a little bit of your view of the industry of venture capital. I'm not going to talk about angel list and syndicates and kind of a disintermediation of the process, but more of the use of tools, of AI tools in particular. I mean, here, for example, we as a firm that is filtering solutions for large corporates, we do our best to use and incorporate as much as possible AI tools to to help in the filtering of signals. But I think we're very early stage. Do you see a future where really the best investors are the best collectors of tools and interpreter of those tools in a way that really the value of the personal relationship and judgment is minimal to the really to the added of the intelligence that you get from tools?
I think, like, in order to be a great investor, there are different components. So like there is the sourcing ability. So any kind of tools can help. Like, we think of it as like just another growth hacking type of channel, especially if you don't have a strong brand, you want to do out of geo stuff, you want to do multi-stage investing, like tools can help you on the sourcing front. Of course, yeah. We do use homegrown tools, PitchBook, other people's software products. Like, yeah, of course, Aptopia, like Apani, all these things, payment processing, data. We do use a lot of that stuff. But it's not like, oh my God, we're going to fire the entire team. Nobody does any outbound calls right now. We're just going to focus on whatever comes in through the tools. We didn't do that. So sourcing is an area where the tools can help. The second one is judgment, where the tools can help a little bit, but not as much. And then the third one is winning, where the tools can help pretty much, not at all. Because normally when you see a good company that you're excited about, if it's a really good company, they have 5 other offers. So why you versus the rest? And then when you're in the business as an investor, the very, very best returns come from compounding and aggregating a lot of capital and your best assets. The tools can help you a little bit doing that, but this is where, judgment and ability to continue to win the minds and the hearts of the same set of founders can give you an advantage. So I think that all sorts of tools can help a fair amount with sourcing, a little bit with the evaluation, knowing the competitive landscape, how quickly company is growing compared to the rest. But I don't see a world where there's going to be a complete substitute for the job. Now, it's great news for the founders that every few years there are other alternative funding options. So 10 years ago or 8 years ago, Kickstarter, huge alternative. AngelList, like when I started, like I remember in my first year at GC and I didn't have much of a network, I probably requested 200 intros, through AngelList. Now it's different world, for AngelList. ICOs, like a couple of years ago, phenomenal. Like the dream, the absolute wildest dream of a basement hacker. You don't have to talk to anybody. Money hits your bank account. So, and every couple of years, forgot about the best. Yeah, without control, without equity dilution, like amazing, right? So there's always going to be something new, and it's great news for all sorts of founders. The good news is that for VCs, we only need like 1 or 2 amazing return profiles for like the companies we invest in every decade, and we're good. So there is going to be a market for us for sure.
All right, with that, thank you very much, Niko.